Senator
Thank you.
Hoylman.
Thank you, Ms. Moreau. Thank you for being here. Could I ask a question whether the American Petroleum Institute, your organization, does it acknowledge the existence of climate change and the impact that fossil fuels have had in furthering it?
Well, I think our association, American Petroleum, certainly recognizes that there is climate change. I think.
Does it recognize that fossil fuels contributed to the massive warming that we've had in the last year?
Well, you know, it's interesting that whenever I appear at these forums, this one particularly on fossil fuel divestment, the first question anyone in the legislature asks me, whether it's the city council or today, is, what is your opinion on climate change? At least you said, what is the American Petroleum Institute's opinion on climate change?
But seems to be a reasonable opening question.
Well,
That's probably why you get asked
well,
it.
no, I think one of the reasons I get asked is because, you know, certainly, and I would say most people in this room would demonize people that do not agree that oil and gas industry is wholeheartedly responsible for the fact that we may have more greenhouse gas emissions. There's going to be actually a diversity of opinion even among our member companies as to the causes and also the solutions. Generally speaking, though, at American Petroleum Institute, we very much focus on one thing, and that is producing energy for this country that's affordable, that's reliable, and at the same time helps the environment as much as possible in a productive country that depends on
The reason we ask the question is because for you to tell us that you don't think it's prudent and it's only symbolic to divest the pension fund of fossil fuel stocks doesn't carry much weight with me personally if your organization actually doesn't acknowledge the fact that fossil fuels are contributing to the hottest year on record.
Well, I think there are scientists on both sides of this debate. As many, you know, I can hear the hisses in the back of the room because, you know, skeptics, as you would call them, are not really allowed, it seems. And I guess we would put some of our companies in that category. However, the fact that we don't think that divestment is an answer to the solution of making other forms of energy more productive, to suggest divestment as a solution, frankly, you don't have to rely on me. You can rely on investment advisors to significant institutions around the country, a number of them which were named in my testimony. You don't have to take my word for it. If you don't want to give any kind of credence to what I have to say because I don't agree with what is obviously your position, that's up to you. But at the same time, everyone in this room got here in a car. Everyone.
I actually took the train.
Well, my point being that we're an industry that is not going away. We're an industry that employs hundreds of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands just in the state of New York alone. We provide an affordable resource that's needed, a necessity of life for many people in this country, especially people that are poor and in the middle class.
If I could just respond.
And by the way,
I think those are the same arguments, ma'am. Those are the same arguments that were made by the cigarette industry, employing hundreds of thousands of people.
I'm sorry, but sir, the
appealing
cigarette industry and the oil and gas industry are not the same thing. Everything that you're using in this room to express yourselves today, that give you quality of life, pretty much came from the petroleum industry. This laminate table we're sitting at, the carpet on the floor, your iPhones, plastics, oil and natural gas, not exactly the cigarette industry.
Well, I think you're on an island. I think the island is the island of Dr. Moreau. I think it's shrinking. I think it's shrinking. Possibly due to climate change, but the science is real, ma'am. The science is nearly uniform. And for the petroleum industry, and frankly for you to sit here and say that there is a diversity of opinion on whether climate change exists, is actually insulting to the hundreds of thousands of academicians, years of research. ExxonMobil itself, according to the Attorney General, acknowledged climate change as far back as 1981. So I think we should begin with the agreement. We should stipulate that the fossil fuel industry has contributed to climate change, and we should work from there. But to come to our forum and say that there's a diversity of opinion and that skepticism has a validity in our discourse as a legislative body, I think is false.
Over 1 million people a couple weekends ago in New York City, 1 million customers of Con Ed consume natural gas. Those are your constituents. They can turn off the tap. They don't want to use it, and so can you.
Well, I think part of yes, but
Closing
my closing comment is I think the motivation behind this bill is acknowledges that we are dependent on your industry. We want to wean ourselves off of your industry. That may hurt your bottom line, your membership's bottom line, which I think is why you're here. But I think we see as a society, as New Yorkers, a greater goal at the end, which is a cleaner, healthier planet, and to hopefully stop and maybe even reverse the impact that fossil fuels have had on the warming of our planet. Thank you very much, Senator Nasillion.
Felix Ortiz.
Yeah, let me thank you for your testimony, and I always love when we have both sides of the coin in the room, because I've been elected for 22 years, and some of my most successful legislation had happened as a result of really listening to both sides, and then at the end of the day to come out with a consensus that we move us in the right direction. Saying that, I do got struck by your comment the same way that he did about the symbolism of the legislation. I do have a record in the state legislature that go beyond the symbolism. I have been an architect of legislation that have checked up not just New York State, not just the country, but the whole globe, by making corporate America to have a better understanding on how to do their practices. And I'm not going to be sitting in these chairs right here by just belief that this is just a methodology of symbolism, that we just went to do this just to show that we are just for the show and doing something. I'm here committed to make sure that we get to the finish line. That is the reason why the senator has taken the time to, and our staff, to have a very deep conversation with the controller on this issue, and to continue to have that flexibility where they continue to analyze and trying to come out with a middle ground line where we can finally get something accomplished. New York State has been recognized as a list state, not as a follower state. New York State is which I'm very proud to serve in this House because of that, because I have seen it firsthand how I can really make a difference. So this is not just, it's not going to be a symbolism, it's going to be a realism. It's going to be a realistic point of view that where we're going to get this done. And furthermore, I love all the statements and quotes that you got from all the wonderful schools who receive endowments in order to continue to move forward. And the bottom line is that we heard that the same thing about our housing crisis. When people were sitting in the room like this, many, many hours, many, many days, and over the sun, we find out that we do have a housing crisis where the bank industry had to run to the federal government in order to get a bailout. So it is very important that we, as we move forward, that we can have an open and serious conversation rather than making symbolism comments, and have a deal of respect among ourselves to ensure that we as a professional can really come out what will be the best thing for the future generation of our children and my grandchildren. I have grandkids, I have 9 grandchildren, that they can have a better place to live. So that will also impact your children or your grandchildren or the family members. So my question is go more direct to your testimony regarding the American Petroleum Institute. How are you guys really taking into consideration in the discussion the divestment issue, rather than say that's something we don't want? Rather than believe that this state that you mentioned decided not to do it, but they decided not to do it for the moment. Because I have conversation with a lot of these legislators myself. I'm being very well known nationally because I deal with NCSL. And I have conversation with a lot of these members that you just mentioned. And it's not because they are afraid to step into the plate. It's just because they are doing exactly what we're doing, trying to figure out a way on how to articulate it better. How are you guys are thinking through it by not thinking that this state are not going to do it? You know, what other alternative that you can give us in order for us to do what we believe is the right thing to do and what you believe is the right thing to do?
Well, I think the bill
Without
actually,
that rhetoric.
if I understand correctly, the legislation is really about taking authority away from the state comptroller. I mean, ultimately, this is his presently certainly within his fiduciary authority to make these kinds of decisions based on the advice of his investment advisors and his staff, outside the realm of politics, we would hope. So I think that's where the decisions need to be made. And his role as fiduciary is to do the best for the bottom line of the members, so many people in that pension fund. And I think that he's going to make a decision ultimately, or whoever the state comptroller is, it's got to make a decision based on that. And I think what you're saying here is that regardless of returns, you don't think that the state should be invested in fossil fuels.
I think that's my bill, right?
Right, but what I'm saying is, in other words, returns don't matter.
I don't.
If you're arguing that you shouldn't invest in our companies because you don't agree philosophically with how we make our money, then no return will matter. In other words, the numbers don't matter.
What I'm saying.
That's what my understanding is.
Finally,
of the proposal.
let me just finalize the statement by saying this: that let's think about our children's future. Go ahead, Senator.
Well, when it was pointed out to me that we needed to move on, even though I had a whole series of questions. Karen, I'm wondering, we don't have your testimony, so I'm hoping you'll be able to share that with us. Oh, thank you so much. So we might actually have some follow-up questions for you. I have to say I don't agree with your testimony, but I appreciate very much your being here. And I would actually like to do some follow-up questions to you, if that's all right, and we can continue the dialogue.
I'm more than happy to meet with all of you.
Good. No, I think we could put these things in writing so that everyone can have a chance to look at the arguments back and forth. And I'm going to self-edit by saying we have to cut off simply because too many people wanted to testify today, which is really a wonderful thing that we had so many people who wanted to testify. So again, my staff is being very cognizant of schedules. So I'm going to cut this off, but it's not done.